Well, welcome to this webinar today. My name is John Aldred, Director of Product Management here at Prensia. And today we're going to be looking at Aqira 2019 for engineering apps and process standardization. So to give you a quick outline, we're going to start with an overview of Aqira for those of you who are less familiar with the product. And then we'll move on to covering some of the new capabilities that we've released recently as part of the 2019 version. Just to summarize who we are as Prensia. So Prensia is all about empowering engineers to avoid the cost of unexpected failures by using our software and related services to deliver reliable products and processes. So you're probably familiar with one or more of our software brands, Encode for durability analysis and ReliaSoft for reliability analysis. And then we also offer related services such as training and consulting, and we also have materials characterization through our testing lab as well that's related for durability analysis. In terms of the software products we have, as we said, ReliaSoft and Encode on the left-hand side. In red, we have the ReliaSoft products, Weibull++ being a very well-known product for reliability life data analysis, and XFMEA for FMEA analysis. On the right-hand side, we see some of our Encode products, Design Life and GlyphWorks, obviously being commonly used for durability analysis in both test and CAE. The focus of today's presentation is about Aqira, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. So let's start off with a question. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing engineers in the next 5 years? Think about it for a minute. It probably depends on what industry you're in or even what department you're in. But what's the biggest challenge that you see? I mean, I'd actually be interested if you wanted to use the Q&A function within WebEx today, if you wanted to post your thoughts, your response to that question. Maybe we could take a look at the end of the webinar and see what people came up with. I'd actually be very interested to see what is the answer that you have for that question. Well, we asked this question at a recent user group meeting that we had in Detroit. We had over 100 engineers and managers in a room, and so we did a poll, and we gave them some options to choose from. And the options we gave were these. We said, biggest challenge facing engineers in the next 5 years: increasing quantities of sensor data or use of big data. So with connected vehicles, IoT data, it's easier than ever to create huge data lakes, and it's quite a challenge to literally make the most of that. Faster product development cycles. Just doing what you're doing, but do it quicker. Rapidly changing technology or product requirements. So again, automotive industry, think electrification, autonomous vehicles. These are game changers. These are disruptive changes to the industry requiring new technologies. Better correlation between test and simulation. Increasingly, I hear of customers wanting to rely more and more on simulation. So it becomes increasingly important that it can actually match physical test. So correlations is becoming increasingly important as well. And also doing more with less people. Well, those are the options we gave. And interestingly, the results, our survey said, we have to learn to do more with less. That was the result of our survey. And and perhaps that indicates that sometimes it's in engineering, it's not even so much about the what, but the how. How do we do a better job of what we're currently doing? How do we work more efficiently? And again, so doing what we've always done, meeting some of those other challenges, which are still real challenges, and those are real things that we're working on in the industry. Are we going to meet those challenges by doing what we've always done? So what if you could actually take your experts and enable them to focus more on some of those new technology challenges, dealing with those huge amounts of data, developing analysis processes for electric vehicles? What your experts focused on that to enable more of your other engineers to perform the more routine tasks. So your experts are actually able to take their attention off some of the things that they're having to do because they can't hand it off. What about if we could actually capture corporate knowledge, not just talk about capturing it, but actually capture corporate knowledge and really reuse it? Just plain automate more, have less manual tasks, more automated tasks. What about avoiding reinventing the wheel for analysis techniques in different departments. You see analysis processes being used in one department. They're actually very, very similar to somewhere else, but they're different, or in different departments or in different countries. That obviously is a problem for quality. And that's what Aqira is all about, is helping improve processes like that, helping improve automation, helping to share corporate knowledge. So Aqira is a web-based product, and we'll do some demos today. We'll take a look at it. And Aqira is a web-based product that is on-premise. In other words, it's installed on-site on your servers, that can extend what you can do with Encode software. So Aqira helps engineering teams of engineers with increasing workloads of analysis to be more effective, in other words, do a better job, and also more efficient, be able to do it faster and do more with less people, through easily configured web apps. And we'll take a look at how you use web apps within Aqira and some of its other functionality. Aqira addresses three main areas. We can describe it in sort of three main topics of capability. One is in the area of sharing and standardization. So the ability to share and manage these analysis processes. In the context of Encode, it'll be Encode flow processes, and also gives the ability to run the analysis directly over the web through a browser without having to have any locally installed software. So sharing and standardization is one aspect. Apps and democratization is the next. So in other words, enabling more engineers to be able to run the software by putting it in the form of an app that can be easily shared and used, and then running that analysis on server-side processing to scale that up as well for large distributed execution. And finally, deployment and globalization. So there's benefits around licensing we'll take a brief look at, and tracking license usage, and really making that able to be used across a whole enterprise in multiple global locations. So those are the three main areas that really Aqira takes what Encode does in terms of our software and enables you to scale that up across an organization. So I mentioned licensing advantages. Let's start with that. If there are the engineers who are watching this, you may be less excited about talking about licensing benefits. Managers and IT might be a little bit more interested. We'll keep this fairly brief. The reason I'm including this is that this is the primary reason that many of our larger organizations have added Aqira to their systems because of these benefits. One of the benefits is around the fact that with Aqira, you use land-based or local-based pricing for our license tokens. So Encode has our Prensia. We have a token system that's called Prensia Access. It's a token system that gives access to not only the Encode product range, desktop products, but also the ReliaSoft product range as well from a desktop product perspective. So Prensia Access is the token system. And typically, to use a licensing globally, there's a global uplift in terms of pricing. With Prensia Access and Aqira together, the Prensia Access pricing is local licensing. So that's a lower price on the actual license tokens themselves, and the increase comes in the number of units drawn based on the time zone of the user. So that way, you're only paying the additional uplift on those users in those locations that require it. That way, the actual total cost of the user is actually reduced, total cost for the customer. So that's a great benefit for, again, a global organization wanting to deploy software globally. Another benefit is actually that we reduce some of the token counts directly when you have Aqira, based on the fact that we are viewing this as being an enterprise deployment. So a great benefit is with design life, so using design life for CAE simulation. With Aqira, the number of units drawn per processing thread is reduced from 150 down to 35, so about a 75% reduction in the number of units drawn. In order to take advantage of the fact you can run these design life jobs not now on your local desktop, you can run it on a server, you can scale it up, you can run it with multiple threads, and so we're making that even more attractive. And also, On the ReliaSoft side, we talk about Aqira extending what you can do with Encode software. From a licensing perspective, it also extends, gives benefits on the ReliaSoft side as well. So specifically, XFMEA, the product I mentioned for failure modes and effects analysis, using that with Aqira, it only draws 75 units instead of 300. And you also get access, if you're an Aqira user, you can also use SEP, which is the enterprise portal for looking at reliability results. You can use that at no extra cost. So those are some of the licensing benefits. I just want to mention that because they really are key for a lot of the return on investment that our customers see for using Aqira. Let's move on to the engineering benefits, and let's look at this sharing and standardization area. So in Encode software, if you're familiar with Encode software, then you will know what a flow is. A flow process is what we see on the screen there. It's using the Encode desktop environment to create a box and pipe interface for an analysis process. Inputs, analysis, functions, outputs, displays. That process is called a flow, and you can save those flow processes to help capture that analysis process and reuse it. That's great. Aqira really takes that to another level by then giving you a central hub where you can then share. You have version control of those processes, control who can access them, who can see them, who can download them. Really takes that to another level. So in Aqira, we have the concept of a flow list. We have the ability to see the flows that have been shared with you within Aqira. And here we've got a screenshot of something called flow details, so I can dig into see information about a flow that's been shared with me, see information about it, and even documentation and attachments related to it can be seen right there. And we'll do a quick demo of that in a moment. And additionally, not only can you then share these analysis processes directly through this web hub, this web portal, you can also actually run Encode directly. So we have what's called remote Encode running on the server. Through the browser, you can directly then access a running of Encode without having to have a local installation. One of the benefits of that, talking to customers, is it's actually easy to get all of your users running the latest version. In a larger organization, it can be quite time-consuming and costly for IT to update all those machines. And it's quite common that different users are actually running older versions of the software. This way, you update one server, all the users get the latest version. So let's jump out and do a demo right there. And let's take an example whereby I want to find the corporate standard for generating a test report for a specific type of lab test I have. I have some measurements, I have some measurement data, I have some data files, and I need to create a standard report. How do I use Aqira to find that standard analysis process and generate the report? Well, let's jump out, and I'm going to jump into Chrome. So hopefully you can now see my Chrome browser, and Aqira is here as my login screen. And again, I'm just using, so this is just a browser. I don't have to use any local software. So I'm going to log in as a user to this system. And when I log in, I'm going to see my own personalized dashboard. Every user has their own dashboard. They can configure it with what they see on their dashboard. These are fully interactive tiles. I can look at the data that's being shown here. But what I'm going to do is go over to the main menu on the left, and under the analysis section here, there's something called flow list. Well, as the name suggests, the flow list is the list of flows that has been, I can see a list of all the Encode flow processes that either I've created or have been shared with me. And I can filter this list down in various ways. For example, I can for example, enter the word, let's say, report in the summary field here, hit enter, and start filtering down the list based on characteristics of how it's described, its name, its owner. Or I could perhaps do something a little more advanced here. If I just reset that and go to this advanced filter tab, and I could look at various other metadata on it. I can use tags, so I can put metadata tags on any of these processes, so I can sort them, categorize them. I can even say look for particular glyphs or analysis process types that I've used in this in these flows. So, for example, I can start typing say studio display and hit apply. It's then going to find me again. What are the analysis processes that contain that exact glyph? I can then dig down into each one of these individually. I can look at the information on each one, find information about each analysis process. And an important aspect that I've touched on is the fact this is version controlled. So I can have multiple versions of that flows, and I can choose as the author of the flow who I share that with, which version I share, or even which ones I pull back from being in circulation. Once I've found the process that I want, I can literally just click this button here, click download, and I can take that, download that data to my desktop. And once I've clicked it and downloaded it, I can then use it just like you do today. So right there, standardized process in the in Aqira, you can download it and use it just like you do today with desktop installation of Encode. But instead of opening that file locally, what I'm going to choose to do is I'm going to click on this other button here next to it, which is Open. So that's going to open a new Chrome browser tab, and it's going to open that flow process in the browser. So now you've got the familiar Encode environment. If you're familiar with GlyphWorks, for example, you see the environment. I've got data here. Now, in this case, this is data that is accessible to me from the server. Every user in Aqira has your own, by default, working area, but you could browse to other areas. And I can just drag the data on to my drag data onto the input glyph. And I'm interacting with it just like I'm running on the desktop, but actually this is all running on the server side. So I drag data in, pressed run. It's going to run the process, and I've created my report. And this being Encode, of course, I haven't just done this on one channel. I've processed all the data that's in the file, or multiple files. If I'm the owner of this app, I can then go back and I can exit. I can save my changes back in. So I'm just going to exit out. And I can also even create new processes from scratch. That hopefully gives you some idea of sharing standardized flows within Aqira, and also running those flows on the server using a remote encode. So those are kind of two things we just covered there: sharing of standardized flows and running encode in a browser without any local installation. So let's jump back into the PowerPoint. So let's talk next, just to complete our summary of what Aqira is. Talk about the third aspect here, apps and democratization. So analysis can get complicated, and you've got an example there, a screenshot of an analysis flow. We've got lots of different glyphs. In this case, it's doing a CAE simulation. The problem is that's great for the expert who's created it. It's less easy to hand that flow process off onto the new graduate engineer who just joined the department and expect they're going to get the right answers. So apps are an easy-to-use front end for what could be a very sophisticated analysis process. What we want to do is just ask a few simple questions that are relevant. We want to hide all the complexity of the options that we don't want the user to touch. And then what we want to do is provide the results in an intuitive and graphical manner such that it's easy to interpret what the result is, or easy to access the results files, or whatever the appropriate outcome is. So let's look at an example for that. Let's imagine I work for an automotive OEM, and I need to run a fatigue analysis on a full vehicle or body-in-white structure. I want to ensure I do this in accordance with my company's best practice for this analysis, and I have linear stress results from an FE analysis. I have a text file that defines which material names to be used for each part of the model, so I have a bill of materials to use. And I also have the loading time histories that I want to use. So how do I make sure I do this right? Well, let's jump back into Aqira. So up to this point, we've looked at flow list. We're going to jump down here to something called an app list. So again, as the name suggests, these are all the apps that are available to me. And I've got the same functionality here in terms of filtering it down, etc. Here's a analysis process we're going to run, and we're going to run this process here. So this is the one that says full vehicle structure. So this is the analysis app that is for doing this type of analysis. So I press run. It's going to open up that app in a new tab again. And here, the author of this app has designed this screen. It's called a custom page, which shows, in this case, some instructions of what we're going to do next. And also provided some settings that he's enabled the user to adjust. So in this case, what percentage of the model do we want to do a detailed analysis on? Let's just make that, say, 30%. Let's say select I want a hypermesh results file as an output. And I've got an option here to show some advanced options. So let's take a look at those. And I'm going to increase the number of processing threads. And I'm going to leave the default for the stress combination to be absolute maximum principal for the fatigue analysis. So these are some options. So this has taken what is all the options all the other options for design life have all been hidden away. What this is going to then do is execute the analysis. But first of all, I need to select the input file. So I hit next. I then go to pick my data files. In this case, I'm going to pick my FE results file first. So I'm picking that as a Nastran results file and hit next. I then go to it says bill of materials. So I pick my bill of materials file, hit next. And then I'm going to go and pick my loads that I want. In this case, the app has been designed to give an option here called View Time Series. So instead of directly submitting the analysis, I'm just going to take a look at what I just picked there. And again, I've got some time histories here that I can take a look at. If I'm happy with the data that I've picked there, I can then submit that for analysis. So what that's going to do now is take all those files that I've just selected on the server. It's going to then submit that as input to a design life job to perform the fatigue calculations. Now, this is going to take about a minute to run, which in the grand scheme of things is pretty quick for doing a full vehicle structural analysis. When you're doing a demo, that's a long time. So let me just jump out and just show you some other things. So while that's just running for a minute, I can then carry on and do anything that with Aqira. This is running a different tab, so I can carry on working in Aqira. For example, one of the things I can do is go to the job list and monitor how my job's going. So I can see here this job's been running. It's executing fine. It's got the main app that's running and also the individual flow process that's running, that's being executed. We can just refresh that and see if that's still running. So it's coming up on a minute. It shouldn't take much longer than that. So let's jump back in here and just wait for it to finish. So it's once it's finished, it's going to bring that to the screen. And this is now showing the body structure results for the fatigue analysis. And again, I'm not sure how fast this is going to come across in through the WebEx, but this is a pretty responsive post-processor that we've provided that's got dedicated fatigue analysis capabilities. For example, the ability to have a default it knows it's looking at damage or like a log of life. Let me just change that to life. So life repeats a log scale. It also has specific fatigue capabilities such as showing beyond cutoff or static failure directly. I can interact with the display here. For example, I can I can choose which parts I want to show, or I can put a cutting plane upon this. Let me just revert that around the other way. I can adjust this interactively and even turn parts on or off interactively. So this is a pretty fully functioned post-processor. The nice thing about this is it's being performed directly in the browser, and I'll give you some more information about that in a moment. So this is one of the new features in 2019 is the CAE viewer. A lot of powerful capability for quickly looking at the results of your design life fatigue analysis. When you finish looking at the results, the next step in this process was, I'm happy with it, I want to download it. I ask for a hypermesh results file. I click on it, it's going to download that. It's about 5 megs. That's not going to take too long to download. Or maybe it will with my connection this morning. But that's example of how you can create an app to go from end to end for your fatigue analysis here for a full vehicle structure. Give the inputs, run the analysis, and then download it. And when you're finished, you can just hit close when you're done. Okay, I'm going to close that as well. So that is an example of running an app. So let's go back into the PowerPoint again. So that is an app that's been created for doing that specific task, showing those specific features and also enabling an engineer to use it. So how would you create an app? Well, first of all, you need to look and say, what does my app need to do? I need to consider things such as this: defining my inputs and outputs, designing my interface. In the app we just ran, we had a screen up front which was offering some settings. Well, we need to design that, or some report that needs to be generated as an output. We need to define the execution. Now, in that case, again, we were running an analysis process using one of those flows that we talked about earlier that was being run on the server. If you wish, you can also add advanced logic. You don't need to add scripting. All of the apps are created without having to do any scripting, but if you want, you can, and we'll talk about that as well in a moment, a new capability for Python within version 2019. Then obviously you need to test and validate it, and then share it. So those are the kind of basic steps to go through to create an app. And apps are all about making analysis easy to use, but they're also need to be easy to make, and it's an important part of our design process here that we not only if someone can create a GlyphWorks process or can create a design life process, then they're also going to be able to have the skills to be able to create an app. In other words, you don't need to be a developer, you don't need to be an IT specialist, you don't need to code or script. You can create an app just by using drag and drop. So that's what we've done. We've created something called an app designer, where literally you can drag and drop the different parts of the app for each step in the process. So the main points then for Aqira, just in terms of a summary of what Aqira provides. Aqira provides benefits from the licensing advantages, provides standardized analysis and access via the web, and it also gives you the ability to create apps to democratize analysis. So let's move on and look at what we added in 2019. So the CAE viewer we just saw. We're going to talk about that a bit more in a moment, so we'll come back to that. Python runner, that's the ability to add a custom analysis step or configuration or some more advanced logic to a process by using Python. DataSearch is the ability to find data as part of an app as input rather than manually selecting files like as I just did. This gives you the ability to automatically find files and either provide them for, say, download or a next stage in an analysis process. And then finally, Encode DES, brand new signal processing capability which is focused on efficient parallel processing for large volumes of data. So we're going to touch on each one of these ones in turn. So CAE Viewer you just looked at, this is based on WebGL technology. So WebGL is a JavaScript API for rendering 3D graphics, and the nice thing about WebGL is it's a standard part of HTML5. That means you don't need any plugins. It just works if you've got an HTML5 compatible browser, even a mobile device. WebGL is part of the HTML5 standard. Therefore, CAE Viewer works in that browser directly. And the graphical rendering is done on the client using the local hardware. Now, that might sound like a disadvantage to you because you think, I need to download a big results file. That's not the case. We only download the minimum data that's required for rendering the 3D graphics. So even for a results file that might be gigabytes in size, we're only talking about downloading a few hundred, maybe a few megabytes maximum in terms of data. And download is typically quick. So fast interactivity, You see the interactivity, hopefully, with even over WebEx. The level of interactivity is very good, even though all I've got is a browser. I've got no local software for the post-processing. And the benefit of this really means that doing it with the local browser means that you don't then have to worry about what are the graphics capabilities of the server. You don't need to have, even though I'm running Aqira on a server, I don't need to have special NVIDIA GPU chips. I don't have to have special graphics capabilities on the server. All of that heavy lifting is being done for the interactive graphics on your local laptop or whatever your device is, and it's quick. Next is Python integration in apps. So this enables you to define custom processes, specific Python runner section we can add into your apps, which you can then put in whatever you want. This includes being able to use additional Python modules that you can import, and also the Encode DES that we're going to talk about later. That is also called using Python. So that means you can integrate standard Python functionality with this brand new Encode DES capability. And as you can just see on the screenshot on the right there, we provide a nice color-coded interface for the input of the syntax highlighting there for the script itself. So the third area to talk about here in terms of new capabilities is DataSearch. Now, if anything, again, talking to about some of the challenges we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, this is becoming more and more of an issue. Volumes of measurement and sensor data continue to increase. Whether it's a wind farm that you've got gathering 8,000 data files a year, or an OEM that's got 2 million connected customer vehicles, or a power generation company that's monitoring 2,500 turbines, or an aerospace OEM where you're collecting 3 gigabytes per flight with 10,000 channels. This is increasingly what engineers are having to deal with. And so the customer needs are, how do we find the data that's already been acquired to avoid expensive retesting? How do we've acquired all this data, how do we make the most of the data that's already there? How do we gain the value from all that sensor data that's being stored, and to be honest, based on what I've seen, mostly not being used at all? Or how do we just make that data just simply more accessible to more engineers, as opposed to just a handful of people that have it, maybe a few data scientists that will be given access to it? How do we give this to more engineers to be able to use? Well, let's look at an example. Let's take an example where, again, for automotive, if I have, say, 180 proving ground data files related to a specific project. So we're designing a new sport utility vehicle. We've got multiple channels per acquisition. We've got 2 different drive types. We've got 2-wheel drive, 4-wheel drive. We've got 2 different weight conditions, gross vehicle weight, unladen. And currently, all that data is just sitting out on a shared drive. Now, fortunately, the shared drive has been organized such that it's actually following somewhat of a logical folder structure: vehicle, model year, drive type, weight condition. And all these data files we have are a specific format, and they also contain metadata that includes things like a relative damage calculation on the strain channel. So all that metadata is all embedded in the file. So how can we use that in Aqira? Well, we can index these files into Aqira. An admin within Aqira, an admin user, can index that data into Aqira, and then that metadata can be automatically extracted. In this case, we can also extract the location of those files. So we can actually use the folder structure that it's in and create metadata that follows that structure, as well as extracting metadata out of the files itself, and also calculating stats on the fly for data files that we recognize. So let's look at an example for data search. Let's say for all 4-wheel drive unladen vehicles, I want to find all the acceleration channels that exceed a certain value. How would I do that? Well, let's jump back into Aqira. And let's go back to the app list. So previously, we ran this little one here, the full vehicle structure app. There's another app here called Vehicle Data Search. So I'm just going to run that app and start. And it's going to bring up with a screen. Now, this is a screen that's been designed by again, the author of this app, and it's given me certain options. So, for example, I can pick what is the vehicle type we've got here, what is the model year I'm looking for, data related. I also have the ability to choose drive type, weight condition, And in this case, it's given me the option to say, select data type and then a maximum value. So here I can say strains, displacements, or accelerations. These are the different types of channels that are available in this data across all those 180 data files that have been indexed. So for example, if I go back and I say I want acceleration levels, take the default maximum value there. So okay, let's me find all those channels that are above that as a max limit and hit search. It then runs through that. It finds me 72 results for all of that. What I want to do, go back and say, well, that's across all the data sets. Let me go back and say what I actually wanted was four-wheel drive and unladen data. Okay, four-wheel drive, unladen. Let's do that same search again. Okay, great. So it's now just found me 6 channels. I've got that relative damage calculation that's been extracted out of the metadata. Got the max value there, all exceeding the value that I set. Let me just take a look at that and press View Channels. And I can actually then look at the data that's been found, all exceeding 20G. So this is, in this case here, I've got, what's nice about this is that I'm not even just finding the data files that this exists in, I'm actually extracting the individual channels themselves. Again, let me just go back and change a different setting again. So let me just say for this, four-wheel drive, unladen, but now let's just take that down, something a little bit smaller, say 10G, bump, do a search again. Again, finding more data, this time where my max exceeds 10. I've got the app designer here, the app author has put some various options here. We've looked at view channels. It's also given an option here for report. So what this is going to do is run an analysis in the background using a flow like we saw previously from the flow list, automatically run that. It's going to run through all those data files on that process and then generate a PDF report. Now in this case, it's been set up to create a separate PDF report for every individual test. So for example, if I click on one of these, so I just click on one at random, I'm going to download that, click on that PDF. Here is a report that's been generated for all the channels in that test where my condition was met. In this case, acceleration channels greater than 10G. And it's processed all that data and created a PDF report, summarized it. And that might be exactly what I want. If I want, I can then do select all and hit download, and it will download, zipped up all those reports into a single zip file. Now, the nice thing about the apps is the fact that if for your company, that's not how you want to do search, or that's not how you want to look at the results, that's fine. You can configure this app to do this exactly how you want. The main point here is the fact that the search capability that we've got here enables you then to drill down into large amounts of data, extract the data, either whole files, whole tests, or individual channels that you want for processing. So that's an example of using DataSearch. The way this works is, again, we're running this within an app, and so it's an app component. We haven't got time today to go into all the details of how you create an app and how app components work, but obviously that's something that if you're interested, we can talk with you about. I'll give you either demos or offline. But the data search component here is provided to enable the app authors to search for data, to find data as part of an app. And that search designer view basically is interactive. Again, you can click and you don't have to learn SQL or anything like that. You can set up these searches using options, metadata items on the file level, tests, or even individual channels, combinations of channels, and search for either files, tests, or channels themselves. So that's data search. Hopefully that gave you some idea of that. The last topic I wanted to cover today is this area of this brand new signal processing tool called Encode DES. So the whole area of stream data analytics using Encode DES. And I just want to bring your attention to the fact that there's another webinar we did recently with more details on this. So if you look on the Encode website, actionable insights from digital streams with Encode DES from May 15th. So if you want some more details, you can also refer to that. In general, the challenges around data analytics that Encode DES is looking to address is again, some of the things we've already touched on. There's lots of data. Connected vehicles are a ready source of usage data. Applications such as IoT, structural health monitoring, condition-based maintenance, again, need to deal with large amounts of data. There's also a variety of data, so that's coming from different sources. This can mean different file formats. There can also be problems with that data, and the data tends to be, in many of these cases, not equally spaced. They're time-stamped. You've got a timestamp and then a set of data, timestamp, another set of data, and sometimes the quality of that data can also be in question. And then additionally, there's also a need for speed, a drive for more and more sort of real-time tracking of these indicators, understanding of the data. And then if you have large amounts of data accessible to you, just literally processing that huge amount of data requires a high performance, a high speed of analysis, just literally to be able to get through it all. So what's Encode DES? So Encode DES is focused on helping engineers who have these huge amounts of available sensor data to gain actionable insights from using high-performance data analytics. And Encode DES is provided built into Aqira. It comes with Aqira for that scalable deployment. So let's look at a specific example again, or describe a specific example. A car manufacturer is developing ADAS or autonomous vehicle technology. So that obviously is a challenge in and of itself, but just understanding what is the right performance of the vehicle, you may be using using a fleet of vehicles to provide large volumes of data. And that data is coming, let's say, in the form of CSV files, of understanding how vehicles are being used. These might be manually driven vehicles that you're looking to understand how vehicles are being driven manually, comparing it with autonomous vehicles and seeing how whether the driving characteristics are something that is going to be acceptable for the general public, let's say. So the question is, how do you extract useful information from huge quantities of canned data? So we're talking about here vehicle bus information that's on the vehicle, making the use of that readily available data such that you can then dig into how vehicles are being used, so you can understand how vehicles are being driven, etc. So for example, to quantify the distribution of inter-vehicle distance or inter-vehicle time, in other words, gaps between vehicles, time between vehicles as they're being driven, as an example of a type of analysis. Another question is, how do I cope with that unevenly spaced data with gaps and missing data, coping with the quality of data, and also the fact that this data isn't like a high precision, equally spaced data you get from a proving ground. This data is non-equally spaced, timestamp type data. How do we analyze all that? Well, Encode DES is designed specifically for that type of data. It's designed specifically for unevenly spaced data. It also has functions built in for cleaning up not a numbers, so things that aren't numeric values, that are detecting and correcting anomalies. It has functions for calculating stats, doing histogram counting, such as rainflow, etc. And it also has been focused on achieving the required performance. So, for example, Encode DES, by its nature, is a stream processing framework, which actually means it can then parallel process the data as it comes through that. It's not waiting for each analysis step to be completed before it moves on. It can then make use of the multiple threads and processors, CPUs on a server to really crunch through data. And for example, in this type of scenario, this type of data, we've seen analysis process times that are 100 times faster or over 100 times faster than the equivalent GlyphWorks flow. So GlyphWorks is great. GlyphWorks is fast at analyzing a lot of different types of data. This type of data, where it's non-equally spaced, you're working with large tables of data, you want to be able to process it, you get massive speed ups by using Encode DES. So the three main points on Encode DES: you can extract more value out of sensor data, so you can analyze equally spaced data just like you do with GlyphWorks, but it's really even greater benefit is for unequally spaced data, such as digital bus, or even data coming from a query from, say, some kind of big data system. It is a powerful, scalable, distributed stream processing data, so it's ideal for processing huge data sets, includes algorithms for durability, as you'd expect from us, and is also included with Aqira. So it's easy to deploy, easy to use, you can share the data, share the results, because it's using Aqira as part of apps. So just in conclusion here, pretty much on the 45 minutes, so that's good. In conclusion here, what I just want to do is just summarize then what Aqira can do. If you look at it from the point of view of these different data sources, and traditionally those have been lab data measurements, or they've been simulation. These might be simulated, it might be a CAE analysis, it might be a multi-body dynamic simulation. This is generating lots of data. And our users are already using our desktop tools like DesignLife, GlyphWorks, and VibesYs for combining that data, performing durability simulations. What Aqira does is takes it to another level by enabling a server processing whereby you can access that analysis directly over the web and manage version-controlled analysis processes. So it's the how, it's the managing of the processes. We also have the ability to create apps that enable you to democratize that, take it out of the hands of just the experts, put it into the hands of more engineers who can then make use of these analysis capabilities. And in doing that, providing data search capabilities to be able to find data to use within those apps, server-side analysis for crunching that, scaling that up. And we also have our Encode DES streamed analytics capability, which is, again, a next-generation capability for scalable stream data processing. And that really ties well into what we see in terms of increasing need for analyzing connected equipment data and the types of data that come from those sources. So Aqira really takes what you can do with Encode software and takes it to another level in terms of both scale, both in terms of computation and in terms of usage.